Okay, here we go. Episode 3 of Nat Talks About It. And our episode 3 is red flag or flaw. And I think I'm really excited about this topic because, like the other two topics, it's something that I've talked about in different spaces many, many times. And there's no real consensus really about red flags, but there really is a lot of misconception about red flags. Um, I don't know if with your friends, with your coworkers, with your family, with your partner, you guys have spoken about this topic, but it seems like a lot of us want to call everything a red flag. If we don't like something that someone did, something someone said, how someone treated us, what do we say? Red flag. Oh, that's a red flag. And sometimes it's not a red flag, because I think that the definition of a red flag is very precise, and it's about the consequence of it, right? So when we say red flag or flaw, a flaw, the consequence may not be as negative, right? So let's get right into it. So flaws, right? The things that we don't like about ourselves or the things that we don't like about other people, those are like imperfections that are not usually dangerous, right? These are things like someone who can never be on time, right? Someone who you go out to eat with and always substitutes their order because it's so hard to please them. It's something that is common in a lot of people, something that you'll find in a lot of people, but it doesn't usually end in harming, right, someone. It doesn't usually mean that a relationship is at risk because of this flaw. It's the things that we tend to accept people for, right? The very different thing between flaws and red flags is that red flags are harmful. They're harmful to the people that the person who has the red flag has a relationship with. So I think that a lot of times we like to call things we don't like red flags, or we like to reverse our preference and say it's a red flag, right? So that's not the same thing, right? If it's something that if it's an unhealthy behavior that is causing a negative consequence in a relationship and persists, something toxic, that's more in the red flag basket than a flaw, right? And, not for nothing, but not to get all clinical, but a red flag, right? Once the person identifies that this is a red flag and this is a problematic behavior with their relationship with their mother, with their relationship with their cousin, and their relationship with their partner, it usually requires therapy and like inner work, right? Flaws, not so much. You can just pick up on January 1st and say, this year I'm going to try to be on time for work, or I'm going to try to be on time for meetings. I'm going to try to be on time for my daughter's athletic events, right? Because your flaw is that you're never on time. You're never punctual, right? And people have noted this about you. You've done the work to identify it for yourself, and this is what I'm doing. A red flag usually needs more work than just identifying it and saying that you're going to change it. And not for nothing, usually when there's a red flag, there's a resistance, right? With a flaw, the resistance can move a little bit. Yeah, you don't want people to tell you about yourself, but yeah, okay, I am late, right? Or I make poor decisions in the things I eat, right? Things very basic like that. Um, or like being bad with money, right? That's that's a flaw, right? Not being able to handle your money properly. But the intervention that you need to make a flaw better is typically less than what you need to improve a red flag or to completely kill the red flag. So, why do we think that it's important to know the difference, right? Why do I think that it's important to know the difference between a red flag or a flaw? So, what it is for me is that I think that when we miss the red flags, we lose more. And on the reverse, when we say that a flaw is a red flag, we lose out on blessings, right? So being able to tell, and it's crazy because in the last talk that I had, I talked about discernment, but here we are again, right? Discernment is tied to so many things. And being able to discern between a flaw or a red flag can either push you away from someone that could be a blessing in your life, or bring you closer to someone that can cause a lot of negative consequences in your life. And I think that's the importance of being able to tell between a flaw and a red flag. So that's why a lot of times when I'm working with people or I'm talking to my friends, I worry when someone overuses, oh, he's a red flag, that's a red flag. And a lot of times I'm stuck in a space where I'm like, I wish we could talk about that more, because I'd like to know how you got to the fact that it's a red flag. And don't get me wrong, some red flags, they flag like this flag behind me, right? They are just flapping away where it's clear as day. But I just think that we have been overusing that term and not really looking about, is it just a behavior that I don't like and I don't prefer? Or is it really a red flag? Is it really something that is not workable and could cause me or us emotional harm and sometimes other type of harm, which is why it's important, right? So when we have intimate relationships with people that carry red flags, people that carry a pattern of toxic or harmful behaviors, right? Think about the reasons why we do that. We can see the red flag and we stay in this intimate relationship. Because remember, just because they're your family doesn't mean you have to stay in this relationship. You don't. But we do. We stay. And when we stay in these toxic patterns, it starts impacting our mental health, right? This is when you start seeing symptoms of anxiety, right? You have sleep unrest. You're dysregulated and you can't tell why. Well, why is because you may have been dealing with an intimate relationship with someone that has harmful red flags, right? And you haven't been able, or you tell yourself, well, I'm not perfect, and she's not perfect, so I just have to deal with it. So not being able to tell can actually cause these patterns of I guess like of harm on your mental health, right? Lack of sleep, not being able to adjust well, right? To different people or in the relationship itself that has the red flag. And you sometimes won't be able, even if you can identify the red flag, sometimes you won't be able to tell what the consequence has been on you until sometimes you're out of that relationship, until sometimes you've ended it. And what happens what happens a lot of times when you have entertained a relationship with someone, and this goes into the romantic part. When you've entertained a romantic relationship with someone that has toxic behavior, harmful behaviors that pour into your relationship, is you end up with years into a relationship that has impacted your finances. It's impacted decisions that you've made about property. You sometimes end up having children with these people, right? And that's a lifelong relationship once you have children with someone. Sometimes a marriage, right? You end up marrying people into these things, and that impacts everything in your life, right? So you're normalizing these unhealthy red flags into flaws, telling yourself that they're flaws, and they're causing you decades of trying to correct a mistake or trying to correct a non-productive choice, something that went directly against what you intended to do for yourself. That's pretty important, right? If one decision that you make is impacting decades of your life, I'd say that it's pretty important for you to be able to say, oh yeah, that's a red flag, I'm gonna stay away from that. Or that's a flaw, I can work with that. Red flags, a lot of times they break people up, right? Flaws break people up, and my question is, should a flaw break people up? I'm not so sure about that, right? That's like saying that we're all perfect. We all have flaws. I don't know that a flaw should break people up. And I wonder, like, when does a flaw become a red flag? Why is it that I've talked to people that say, well, he's always late to work. I can't date somebody like that, right? When we talk about like deal breakers, because I think that red flags should be, they should be deal breakers. I think red flags should definitely be deal breakers if you know how to identify a red flag. But why is someone who is often late, why is that a red flag? And when I've asked people, they have not yet been able to tie that to why that's a deal breaker or a red flag. So if you have the answer to that, why is it that a flaw can break people up? I'd love to hear about that, right? So for example, someone who is very messy, right? They're very messy. They don't put their dirty clothes where they belong. They leave them all around the bedroom, all around the floor. Not a dirty person. I'm talking about a messy person. That's a flaw. How does, for those of you that say that's a red flag, I'd like to know. So put it in the comments, send me a DM, whatever you're inclined to do. But I would like to know, why is it that we often think, for people who know the difference, why do we always put flaws into the basket of red flags? Because I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that. And, I'm going to talk about two of my red flags that have developed over time. Two of the ones that I see in others that have developed over time. But when we talk about why is it important to be able to tell the difference, is because, let's face it, when you don't properly identify a red flag, it means you can't address it, right? If you don't know what it is, you can't address it. And you get into these cycles of arguing over things that probably weren't even worth it. You lose time and you lose energy, right? How many of us have been in intimate relationships, again, and I'm not talking about just romantic. I think that making a romantic decision, making a lifelong decision with a romantic partner is very important because, like we said, that impacts marriage, that impacts property that we buy, businesses that we start, the children that we have. I understand that. But please know that there are red flags in other relationships. So if I'm investing in a relationship with a business partner that has a red flag, and the red flags are coming out in our relationship, that means that every time that I'm going up against this red flag and I'm trying to work on things with this person, I'm losing energy. Because even if I can identify it, but I keep trying, I'm getting tired of this pattern. So that is a very negative consequence on me. None of us want to lose time and energy, right? Because it's very hard to get those things back. It's impossible to get it back, actually. You could re-energize, but you can't get it back. Um, so I think that that is a very negative consequence, and I think it's something that we don't often think about. We like to say things like, yeah, but I love him, right? Yeah, but I love her, but she's a wonderful person. Is she? Is he? Right? Because depending on how many red flags you have, are you? I don't know. I'm not sure that I have the answer, but I think it's a great conversation piece. So what are some red flags, right? Because I talked about some flaws and I talked about red flags and I didn't talk about examples. So I'm gonna use some of mine that I have seen over time. And we'll see what you guys think about that. So, have you ever spoken to men or women, both heterosexual, bisexual, homosexual, in all types of spaces, and they'll say things like, "Well, I don't know. To be with me, you got to have this type of credit score, and you have to have your own car, and you can't be living with your family or your mom or your sister. I need someone that has these things. And oh my God, do you see the shoes that he wore on the first day that we went out on? I need these things." And when I hear people, we call those like non-negotiables, right? In dating, we say, what are your non-negotiables? We'll say that at brunch, we'll say that via text, we'll talk about it in different spaces. And a lot of times I hear people talk about these things. He needs a car. Oh, she needs her own. If she don't have at least this credit score, I can't do it. Miss Independent, right? Neo hit us with Miss Independent and we ran with it, right? So that sounds great. But a lot of times that I have heard these things, I've asked, and I'm not bashing my girls, right? Because I'm a chick, okay? But I find that women, right? We do this. Women in heterosexual relationships, we do this the most. Right? He needs to come all the way financially correct for me to even think about it. And then I look at you and I'm like, well, sis, are you financially correct? Do you have these things that you're asking of him? Right? Because if you're asking for an 810 credit score, but yours is barely a 700, then what are we doing? What are we doing? You're living with your sister and her kids, but you want him to own his own home. He can't be living with his brother, or he can't have a roommate. So my red flag in summation would be, you've got to be able to bring what you're asking for the other person. It's a red flag to me when you're asking for your person to have things that you're not even working towards on your own. Right? When we talk about, oh, but he needs to be able to fly me out, right? He needs to be able to send me on a trip. Well, when was the last time you paid for your own vacation? You can't afford a vacation on your own, but you're expecting a working man with his own financial responsibilities to be able to pay for you to go on vacation. And that to me, it speaks to having unrealistic expectations. And that's a red flag. Now, because I'm probably going to get heat for this, and I'm okay. I got heat for episode 2 a little bit, and I welcome it. I love it. It's great. But I'm not saying that it's not okay to want something positive in something that complements you, a positive trait that complements you. That's not what I'm saying. That is very much okay. So what I mean by that is sometimes we are attracted to people And we may not know this, right? We may unconsciously not know this, but sometimes we're attracted to people because they complement something in us, something that we want to make better, right? So for me, I have to tell you that for whatever reason, I'm very much drawn, and I end up having like very intimate relationships with people that are into fitness, right? They're usually men that are very much into the gym, very much into making themselves look good and feel good, and that happens. And anyone who knows me, Nat don't like the gym, right? I don't like working out. So that's a little different, right? Because first, I'm not making it a requirement. I'm not saying for me to be with someone, they have to be into the gym. Now, because how hypocritical would that be? Because that's not something that I've and I should, right? I acknowledge that it's a healthy choice in your life, but it's not something that I'm doing. So how hypocritical, and that's the hypocrisy, I guess, is the red flag. How does that look of me to require that of someone else? But what I will say is that it's absolutely okay for me to say, I really like that men that are into fitness care about their health and care about this. That's something that I would like in my own life. So they can help me with that. And in the past, people in my life have helped me think about that differently, right? When I did work out, when I did do things to be physically healthier. So there's a difference between choosing something that can complement and improve something in you and making something a requirement that you don't bring yourself, right? And another red flag for me, and this is very recent, is the lack of flexibility. Now, I'm a very stubborn and determined person, right? I'm very stubborn. And I know that that's a very particular thing to bring up when we're talking about flexibility. But when I say I'm stubborn, is that I'm a creature of routines. I'm a creature of routines, and I adapt those routines in me, and I move the way that I move, right? So just a very superficial example of me and something that I'm stubborn about is that I don't like to be the first person arriving at an event, and I don't like to be the person that closes it down. I don't shut down the club. I don't shut down your son's baptism. I don't shut down any of this stuff. I strategically always plan to arrive after something has started and to leave before it ends. It is something that I do, and I'm very stubborn about that, right? So if you travel with me to an event, just understand that if it starts at 3, we'll be there at 3:15. We're not going to be there at 3. And understand that I'm not staying till 11. That's not going to happen. So that's something that I'm stubborn about. When I talk about lack of flexibility, I'm talking about things in your life that you've been doing for years that have not given you positive outcomes, and you're inflexible to trying something different. I'm also talking about the things about yourself that people that don't know each other have said about you that have impacted relationships, jobs, opportunities, and you still have not changed them. That's the inflexibility that I'm talking about. That's a red flag to me. Someone that is so centered and focused on who they are and not looking at the pieces of what who they are has that really does need to change, right? Well, I'm not changing for nobody. Woo, red flag. Red flag. Because you could say that But in essence, it's not changing for somebody, you're changing for yourself. So, change is something that when I'm meeting new people, I like to bring up because I like to see how you think about it. What do you think about it? Because everyone says, I'm always into learning new things and I would love to grow until we come to an impasse where we're highlighting, and I mean us in a relationship, right? Either by something that has happened or discussion. We're highlighting something that has brought out a negative consequence in your life. And you're like, oh no, but I'm not changing that. That's not why that happened. It had to be another reason. Ding, ding, ding. That's a lack of flexibility. And that's really important to me. Those two, and that's only been recent. I haven't always been able to tell that. But in recent times, in the last couple of years, I've understood that lack of flexibility about yourself will often carry into how you and I engage in our relationship. If you're not willing to look at yourself openly, and I'm not saying in a discussion where you and I are just talking about everything that's bad about you, right? There's a way to have that. And every relationship has its own style. But if you're just not open to discussing it, to hearing about it, that's a red flag to me. So the other piece when we talk about these red flags is, okay, Nat, so I see the red flag. What should I do? Right? Some people genuinely don't know what to do. And I think that one of the reasons why we don't know what to do is, again, we don't know the difference, red flag or flaw, right? So being able to identify it is important. But once you identify, being able to acknowledge it, don't downplay it. Don't tell your sister, yeah, but, right? The minute you say, yeah, but, you're not acknowledging it. So acknowledge that it's there to yourself, even if it's about yourself, right? To yourself, acknowledge that it's there and do your research. I don't mean look it up, right? I don't mean go on Google. I don't mean go on Nat Talks About It. I mean, how often does this red flag show up? What are the stories outside of me for this person and this red flag? And it's not just romantic relationships. Again, you can do that in friendships. How many, a lot of us have different friend groups. Is this something that this person does in other friend groups? So it's not just me, right? So do your research. Is this a pattern of a toxic behavior in this person? And that might signal to you how you want to move. Is it something that you want to address? Or is it something that you just want to clear? Listen, I'm out, right? Some relationships aren't worth the work, so you're out. But if you do decide to stay within a friendship, within a family relationship, within a romantic relationship, where you've identified a red flag, you've acknowledged it, and you do the research, now you have to communicate about it. And this is the part where we get stuck, right? We think, again, I'm accepting her for who she is. I'm accepting him for who he is because I want to be accepted. That's a lie. That's a lie. What's at the core of that is not often that you're doing it because you want to be accepted. I think it's about the fear that this relationship might go away or not knowing how to talk about it, which happens to me. I don't always know how to talk about everything, but it's not often that I don't try. And sometimes the try comes out in the wrong way, right? And the thing is that when you communicate with somebody about a red flag, and I talked about a little bit about this in the last episode, it's not the response to the discussion that matters the most, but it's your reaction to me bringing it up. What I mean by that is, and I touched on that last time, is are you blowing up? Are you becoming defensive? Are you avoiding the discussion? That's a problem. That's a problem. If I bring something up to you that is worrying me about your behavior, after I've identified it, after I've acknowledged it, and after I've done my research, where I've been able to say, oh, this is part of this person. That's tough. And it's not a flaw. And I'm bringing this to you, given that the communication is productive, right? Bringing that we're using the right tools to do this. And you can't be open to that. That's a red flag within the red flag. Because what you're actually showing is that there is poor conflict resolution. And in romantic relationships, baby, that'll end something quick. Even if you can't tell that that was what ended it. Poor conflict resolution is a quick way to end a relationship that had potential. But once you've had, and listen, there is never going to be a time, and I'm not, I've healed some parts of myself, but I wouldn't say that I'm a healed person. But there's a lot of my trauma and a lot of what I have been through that I have healed, and I'm healing, right? And even me, there is never a time that we're going to have a sit down about negative things about me, and I'm going to turn on the tea kettle and sit down with excitement to do that. That's not going to happen. That's just not realistic for most of us. I think you have to be like super healed to be able to sit down and say, hey, let's talk about all the bad stuff about me. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a way to do that, right? Even if it's in doses. If someone says to me, Nat, there is something about you that I think is showing up in our relationship, and it's very triggering to me. And I'm worried that this is going to impact whether we work out or not. I have a few options. I can say, wow, I didn't expect to do that. I didn't expect to hear that, but I'm not in the space to do that right now, and table it for another time. I can go head on, and we can have the back and forth and whatever, be brave about it, and whatever happens, happens. Or I can shut it down completely. And let me tell you something. If we didn't talk about it in episode 2, making it easy now makes later hard. Trust that. I've done that dozens of times. I've made it easy now, and in 3, 4, 5 months, that demon comes up again, and it's harder than if I would have done it the first time. So putting these conversations off may bring you to a place of comfort right now, but it's not going to be productive to a lasting relationship. That's just what it is. So if my partner or my friend or someone brings a conversation to me about a toxic or harmful behavior that is impacting our relationship, and after we communicate in this way, that persists, that's also a big issue. Why, if we have spoken about this, why are you continuing to do it? And there could be a lot of reasons, right? I could not have the tools to make that change. I may need something else, which is how I went into the therapy piece, right? I may need some additional assistance. Or I just don't care enough, right? Because I don't think that not having the tools should go in the basket of I don't care enough. I don't think that's accurate. Because what happens when you don't have the tools? You go get it. It's the same thing, right? And the person who had this conversation with you would be the best person to say, I thought about that, and I'm scared that I don't know how to do that. I'm scared that I might not have the capacity to do that. Whew. That's healing, right? Just being able to acknowledge that, and that's big. But when you just put it off and you persist to do this thing that I told you was harming us, then you don't care about the us, whatever that us is. The last thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to red flags, I was having a conversation with one of my friends about red flags, right? And I said something very superficial. And I was like, these people with red flags, just lies and lies, right? Like, why do people lie? Why do people lie in dating? Why do people lie about themselves? Why do people misrepresent themselves? And my friend said to me, well, hold on, Nat. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair to say that because I have a red flag, I'm a liar. What about those of us that are honest and transparent about a red flag? And I was like, oh my God. That's true, right? So how many of us have been on dates? How many of us have been on second dates, third dates? How many of us have been in relationships with people that have said outlandish things or things that don't speak to our values, and we just move past it, right? We move to the next square. Shoot, pass go, collect your $200. And we do that. And then we're like, oh my God, she misrepresented herself. He misrepresented himself. Did he though? Because it was all there. You know what I think about when I think about this? Those of us that have been on dates with people that have kids, and they say things like, oh, I haven't seen my child in months. And we don't stop there. There's a lot of reason why people that are co-parenting don't see their children in days, weeks, months, right? There's a lot of reasons for that, right? We can talk about deployment sometimes. We can talk about people that are parenting, bi-coastal parenting, right? Sometimes your partner moves to the West Coast, you live in the East Coast, things like that. Sometimes I've seen a lot of instances where people split the custody of their children in the years. So if there's two children, one child goes with you, the other. There's a lot of recipes for different families, right? No family looks the same. But when you hear someone say, because the parent and child relationship is one of the biggest and most important relationships in all of life. And when you hear a parent say, yeah, I haven't seen my daughter in months, that deserves a stop, right? That deserves a follow-up. Let's talk about that. Why is that? Right? Because if you let that go, and you find out that the daughter lives 20 minutes away with a parent or a relative or whomever, I'm gonna need a little background to that. How did that come to be? Right? Same thing when people say, I hate my father. I hate my mother, right? Again, that on its own does not mean one thing or another. There's a lot of reasons for that. But I think that once you get into, again, I talk about the 30s, the 40s, once you have lived a life, you begin to understand that the parent-child relationship is very important. It's very important when it comes to how we attach to people, how secure we feel in relationships with others, how we show love. All that matters. And it matters into adulthood. So if I'm in front of an adult who says, I hate my father, I want to tap into that. I want to have some follow-up questions to see how that came to be. Because what we know from experience of ourselves, from experience with people we know, is that the absent parent, the bad parent, the great parent, the good parent, the I never met them parent because they passed at childbirth, all those parents will impact the person that I am and the person I become. So if I'm trying to join with this person into something romantic, Yeah, we got to talk about that. How did you come to that? Right? I'm sorry for that type of grief, but how did you get to that? And I think that that is what I mean, and actually what my friend meant when she said, a lot of us that have red flags aren't lying about it. I told you at date 2 that I hate my mom, and you just didn't address it. You didn't follow up. You didn't talk about it. Right. And I feel like it's that way. One of the things that I've recently been talking about in spaces, and you can go ahead and tell me what you think, is people who are dating one person but being sexually intimate with someone else. So this person is with person A, and that person gets dates and text messages and phone calls, and you're clearly trying to figure this out with this person. You are you are dating this person. You're trying to screen in or screen out, right? But you're having sex with a completely different person. That's a red flag to me. And that's something that you should stop at. If that's something that someone you know is doing, that deserves a conversation. Why is that? Why is it that you're not doing both things with one or both of these people, right? And what's the communication been with each of them about this thing? But if you're intentionally just having sex with person B and intentionally not having sex with person A and taking this course of courting, right? Getting to know, dating, why is that? Why is that? That's probably an answer that's very important for our relationship. All right, so that is red flag, or flaw. I hope that I gave you some conversation points, some conversation pieces. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave a comment, ask me a question, DM me on Instagram, all of the above. I really have been appreciating all of the feedback. And next time on Nat Talks About It, I'm very excited because I'm bringing a very good friend of mine to the conversation. So I think it's one that you're going to enjoy. Anybody that knows Leah, she is wonderful. And we are going to be talking about something that she and I have actually spoken about many times. And we're going to bring the conversation to you. And it's, why do women feel like they have to act like they don't want it? Right? And it can be anything. I know that when you hear that question, you're automatically going to go one way, but I'm talking about everything. Why do women feel like they have to act like they don't want to propose? What's so wrong with a woman proposing? Right? Or why does a woman have to act like they can't ask someone out on a date? Or why do women have to act like they don't want to initiate the sexual progression, sexual intimacy in a relationship? And I think that, for women in our 40s, it's a very interesting conversation because you would think that we would have passed that. We want to think progressively. We want to think about the times. We want to think about the decades that we've lived. But it's still happening. So tune in. 2 Sundays from today, me and Leah are going to talk about it. Thank you.